Hey everybody, this is American Wag, number 6, 7, and 8, Blitz mode. So, I'm Mike and this is Mark, and we're doing this from a little different angle this time. Since
Literally, because the camera's over here and you're over here.
Wow, you're brilliant.
Not everyone can think these things.
No, that's true. That's true. Our veteran 6 watchers of our video can attest to the fact that I have to pour some tea, and we are in the gentleman's club. There's a pole dancer over there that you can't see, and we're not sweaty this time.
Technically a pole star, but that's a different story.
Ah, yes, it is. We'll get that into the third segment, maybe. One of our problems here is that we're a lot alike, even though we came up from completely different environments.
Crenshaw, Beverly Hills.
Yeah. And your dad was in construction.
Yeah.
And my dad was a public servant. And so, oddly enough, he grew up Democrat, and you're still a Democrat. And I grew up among Democrats that ultimately revolted me, and I became a Republican. So, what do you think a Democrat should be?
Oh boy, it's a good question.
Are Democrats the way they should be right now?
No, I mean I find myself in fairly stark opposition to a lot of what most people call being a Democrat today. And I'll give you a shorthand for it, which is at a lunch event where I had a conversation about the Democratic Party and how little it's done for working people. One of the well-off kind of middle-aged people at the event took me aside and explained that, look, there's 4 issues that define being a Democrat.
Okay.
How do you feel about abortion, about gay marriage, about gun control, and at the time the war in Iraq? And I looked at her and I'm sort of stupefied. And I said, well, you realize the Democratic Party kind of grew up as a working person's party when it reformed into its modern incarnation. Like, where's anything about that? And, you know, she sort of looks at me blankly because that's so far outside her experience, she doesn't even know what to say about it. And the problem is that today...
Is this one of your West Side cocktail parties?
Yeah, it's one of my West Side luncheon society parties, which are actually very interesting and worth going to. But the reality is that the Democratic Party has basically become her Democratic Party. And it's about a constellation of virtuous attitudes.
Your boomers getting everything they want.
And it's about, you know, how do you feel about sexual identity? How do you feel about race? How do you feel about, you know, inequalities as close as they come? How do you feel about all of these things, which really have nothing to do with the lives of half or more of the people in the country? And it's the question of whether you're really kind of woke or not. It's not the question of who you want to be. And I kind of joke that I and my cohort kind of take the blame for it, because we're the ones who supported George McGovern, and we're the ones who kicked Hubert Humphrey out in the 60s. And we're the ones who looked at George Meany, you know, and the union leaders and were like, you're old, white, racist, pro-war fascists.
Interesting.
And, you know, we shouldn't be dealing with you. And in my kind of adulthood, I look back on that and I'm more than a little rueful about it, because in fact, you know, I kind of wish we had a Hubert Humphrey around right now. I kind of wish we had, you know, a George Meany around right now. I wish we had a strong labor union movement in this country that wasn't about public sector unions, which basically are criminal enterprises that collude with politicians.
Well, I don't know when they were. I don't know when they were never criminal enterprises. I was a Teamster.
Yeah.
In the local 232, which probably doesn't exist anymore, because I looked on it online, and I guess a lot of union stuff isn't online. But you know, it was an adversarial relationship against management.
Yeah.
And I think both labor and management were stupid in the 50s and 60s, and I'm a fan of Peter Drucker, who kind of revolutionized management. And I think one of the things that capitalism has surprised everybody is it become a lot more humanistic than people ever expected. and everything that, I mean, well, let's go through some terms.
So let's stop for a minute.
Yeah.
Let me stop for a minute and basically, look at you befuddled. Sorry about the phone call.
Okay.
And go, you think that capitalism is deeply humanistic right now?
No, I don't. I think management of companies is deeply humanistic.
So you ever talked to anyone who's worked in an Amazon warehouse?
No, but I've talked to people who've worked for FedEx,
Yeah.
and they're very inspired.
But FedEx is, but I'm going to argue that FedEx is sort of an old school company compared to what things like Amazon are today.
Well, yeah, and FedEx is a kind of military hierarchy where the guy on top is the supreme leader.
Right.
But I'm saying that there are a lot of companies now that have beanbag chairs and ping pong tables, and they are a lot more. How shall I say? They're more humanistic. I mean, even Google tries.
Yeah, but
has Google not tried?
Yeah, but here's the problem. The problem is that you and I live in a very small slice of the economy, right?
We're
live
still
here.
Peasants.
We're kulaks.
Oh, okay.
And
This is a dangerous place to be.
yeah, it's always a dangerous place to be. I'm telling you. Because I think that the issue is that for the 5% of the country that works in the information economy,
Okay.
for the 5% of the country that works in the financial sector,
Mm-hmm.
it's a pretty decent economy for us.
Yeah. But these are the professions. Everybody can't be a professional.
But it's not all the professions, right? It's look at what it means today to be an attorney. Now
It's a profession.
yeah, except that they're
a lot
working
of
for
money.
$25 an hour. So
Some attorneys.
numerically most attorneys, a very small slice of attorneys, the ones who went to 5 law schools and have deep family connections,
Okay.
are coming out of law school and making 150 grand a year. The rest of them are coming out and they're competing with people in the Philippines who are doing business process sourcing for $30 an hour.
So you're telling me it's not LA law?
It's not. Sadly, no.
It's not Suits?
I hate to crush your dreams here.
Wow. That's heavy.
I know. And what you're seeing is that a lot of the professions are kind of being turned inside out by the way the economy works today. And there's a good part of that and a bad part of that. Because somebody in the Philippines is making $30 an hour doing business process outsourcing.
But the business process outsourcing is not family law. I mean, you have to do family law right here.
Yeah, no, and
you have to do bankruptcy court.
But
I can't believe that attorneys with law degrees and passing the bar are not making the same kind of money as CPAs.
So you need to have a serious talk with my wife, who used to work for the Bar Association and who dealt for a decade with the problem of oversupply of lawyers and with radical changes in the legal profession.
I know that some lawyers were dumbasses, and I'm like, how could you possibly be a lawyer? Because
Look, there's a lot of people who are dumbasses. There are dumbass tech people. There are dumbass lawyers. There are dumbass doctors even.
Yeah, but you guys have a bar exam. You have a certification.
Oh my God, you passed an exam. You must be a genius. Come on.
Okay.
And but this goes to my point, right? And the point I've got is that we had this post-war boom after World War II, in which we were the only industrial power left standing. Our currency drove the world. We basically called all the shots, and we profited immensely.
Yes, we did.
And we profited in unprecedented ways, and the system we had then was actually pretty good at sharing the profits downstream, in part because everything's manual labor. There's not a ton of automation. And so if I was going to make more cars, I had to build a bigger assembly line and hire more people.
Okay.
And so those people got a union and they made deals with me and they did pretty well. But the reality is that today, what's happened is that's been hollowed out or gutted. And the reality of work for the median person in America today is being a barista at Starbucks starts looking like a really decent career opportunity.
Well, I think that's because we went through inflation. I mean, when I was a freshman in high school, 74, a Mustang cost $2,500. Brand new Mustang.
And how much did you make in 74?
I didn't make anything. I was a freshman.
Okay, but so
in
how much?
high school. But then when I came out, that was kind of like the down payment on a Mustang.
Yeah.
And within those years of inflation, that's where I got locked out of the housing market here in California.
Yeah.
Because my dad bought our house for $30,000
Oh, yeah.
in '66.
So my dad built houses after the war
Right.
that
So they
sold
were
for
cheap.
$8,000.
They were cheap.
I know. But look,
But we went through inflation, and inflation killed everything, and then we went to the global economy so other people could do stuff in the Philippines.
But let's step aside on that for a minute, because if inflationary benefits had gone to everybody, the minimum wage today would be $30.
I'm not saying they did.
Okay.
I'm not saying they did. I'm saying that's what hollowed out the manufacturing.
So let me
Because
come back.
nobody wants to do that kind of work anymore.
Well, let's push aside the question of what hollowed it out and what happened.
Okay.
Right? I mean, because that's a long discussion, and we're going to bore everyone to death. The reality is it's been hollowed out.
Yes.
The reality is that we live in an economy where 12% of the people exert managerial control over 88% of the people.
Okay.
And there is no substantive force that can push back.
Okay.
And one of the reasons I'm a Democrat is that, in theory, Democrats have always been the ones who believed that there should be institutions to push back, whether they're governmental institutions or non-governmental institutions. Because the reality is that if you work in an Amazon warehouse, the only way that you get decent working conditions is if you aren't negotiating one-on-one with Amazon, whether there's a government standing alongside you or a union standing alongside you.
Okay, maybe that. I mean,
Now-
that does make sense.
Now,
But
the
see-
wrinkle in this is automation,
Yeah.
because there's a point where, as we're seeing at McDonald's with ordering kiosks in response to $15
But
minimum wage.
those are the people that didn't want to learn algebra. They said, "When am I going to use algebra?" And every day, I don't want to learn algebra. And you have to be realistic about what is skilled labor and what is unskilled labor. And unskilled labor is always going to be unskilled labor, always going to be at the bottom of the totem pole. And what you need to have is mobility to go from unskilled to skilled.
Right.
And that is a change in the educational system that we refuse to do.
Well, it's more than a change in educational system; it's a change in culture. I mean,
Well, it's also the change in regulation,
And-
so that we don't get what's my favorite term now? The oh my God, read at the bottom in the comments. It's where the big guys make the rules, so only the big guys can play.
Right.
What's that called?
It's good cartelizing things.
Well, yeah, cartelizing, but there's another term that.
Right. Okay.
But so let me come back to the proper and improper Democrats, because I've tried to maintain friends across the aisle, and figure out where these people get their moral arrogance from. And I said, well, I'm not going to be like Rush Limbaugh and just call everybody a liberal and say to hell with it. I make a distinction between liberals and progressives and the neoliberals. Okay? So the progressives, your friend in West LA is a progressive, because all of these are kind of identity issues, and they want to shepherd their pet constituencies over this middle class line, or some line where everybody gets to laugh at the Woody Allen movie jokes and enjoy coffees and baristas and that kind of stuff. And that to them is the perfect bourgeois life. These people, I don't see that they would like a George Meany. They don't like labor. They don't like people who drive pickup trucks. They don't like people who work with their hands unless the hands are fixing them, farm to table food.
Yeah.
All right. So the Democrats are missing. They're run by progressives now, who are all about these identity issues, and part of those identity issues were driven by my folks, by black nationalists.
Yeah.
Because the black political coalition of the 60s and 70s, I mean, we were Negroes all over the place, and then we became blacks in one place. And we have been lecturing the black experience to everybody around the world for 40 years. And it's drilled into your heads, and we burned down cities so that you guys would never forget.
Well, and one of the problems with that is that when you lecture the black experience, you're trapped in it. And
It's a political trap, and it's an identity trap.
and it's a cultural trap as well.
It's a cultural trap, but it couldn't trap all of us.
No.
That's why some of us got out,
You leaked out. Yeah.
and we got into the Republican Party.
So, but let me go back for a second and talk about that moral smugness. So when my values were being formed as a kid, right, in the 60s, what I remember of the Republicans is exactly that they were smug and arrogant, that they were the religious righteous, that they were the people who kind of dismissed people with different opinions, that they were the ones who didn't want to have dialogue, that they were the ones with closed minds. And
Okay.
we, we're going to sweep all that away with our open-mindedness and our toleration and with free speech and all this other good stuff. Sometime in the 1990s, I kind of had this aha moment, and I realized I was in an argument with a bunch of people with guns, because I was at a shooting school, and we were arguing about Gore v. Bush, because it was in the middle of that lawsuit.
Okay.
There's 30 people plus or minus at this dinner, and we're having a pretty robust debate about it with me on one side and 29 of them on the other.
And you're all armed.
And what I loved about it, and what was actually interesting, was it was a real argument.
Okay.
Right? And where they disagreed with me and where they sort of broke out of the argument and went meta, they would look at me and go, "Mark, you're such a smart guy. Don't you understand why you're wrong?" And they'd launch into more argument against my points.
But what was your argument? Give them a little something
The
like
short argument was there's a legal process that we have to run through. The process is why we're a great country. Let the process run. And, we live with the outcomes of those processes, and that's what defines us as a country.
Okay, all right.
And their argument was that, yeah, that's true on paper, but in reality the process is highly manipulable, that Gore was manipulating the process very heavily, and so there's, there are a bunch of arguments against me. But the realization I had after that night was that my liberal friends never argued with me like that.
Okay.
Where we disagreed, every issue was a moral issue.
Okay.
And where we disagreed about, guns, right, because I'm talking about shooting, it wasn't that, "Mark, don't you understand why guns are a bad idea and people shouldn't own them and why we really need to move to restrict them in society?" They are, "If you own a gun, I'm not sure I can be your friend because you may be an evil person."
Right.
And I kind of was stuck in that crack, because what I realized is that my values line up with people who are on the left much more, but my personal style lines up with people who trend more right.
Interesting.
And
Why do you think? So what happened with me? I'll go through a few things that changed me from left to right.
yeah,
And my right career is just my more recent. I'm kind of done with that. But what the American right taught me was to see what I guess you saw. And it was how liberals and leftists, I should have said leftists because neoliberals are just a subset, but I want to talk about liberals, progressives, and leftists.
don't worry about that, Tony.
Okay, but
yeah.
what they did not see was how their vision was not comprehensive. It was like, whatever our feeling is on abortion, we are going to fund a Department of Abortion Rights in the United States, and we're going to have the majority, and you're not going to be able to turn this back.
Right.
And people they just say, well, if we're in solidarity with these minorities and these oppressed people and the victims of abortion, then we will have the moral case, because we want to have a world where this stuff never happens.
Right. And the
And they're
amusing
protectionist about that. They want to get a majority,
right.
sign something into law that will never ratchet back. So they have to absolutely be right all the time.
So here's the other thing that's funny about it, which is, and here's where I get cynical a little bit. Notice that every one of those things involves hiring more people.
Oh yeah.
And the people who get hired
Are their kids.
are their kids and them.
Yeah.
And so we build a Department of Abortion Services.
Absolutely.
Or abortion rights support, or we build a department of racial compliance,
Yes.
or we build a department of sexual preference compliance,
And a Department of Gun Control.
right?
Which they want to build.
And so what you wind up with is lots and lots of jobs for people who do symbol manipulation which is kind of their core cultural skill.
Right.
But the fact remains that if you don't have that, so let me make my kind of lonely man argument, and then we'll sort of wrap this because I think we're pushing towards time. If you don't have a government or large institutions that will fight on behalf of the Amazon warehouse worker, or will fight on behalf of the barista, or will fight on behalf of the hotel worker, or will fight on behalf of the maids, in office buildings, or or auto assembly workers, or anybody else, they are going to get ground down by the nature of the modern economy. Because what we have is we now have everything is a power law distribution.
Okay.
Right? The top 5% now get half of everything. And the other half gets split among the other 95% in smaller and smaller portions as you get further out the tail.
Yeah, I don't see that as a problem, and I don't see it exactly that way, but that's okay.
How do you not see that as a problem?
Because I don't see how that never always was. So, I mean, for example, if you're a Brahmin in India, you don't send your daughter off to, the Daughters of the Brahmin Revolution and say, oh, we got to help the poor untouchables.
Right.
The untouchables persist for centuries.
Yeah.
And they have the skills that it takes to swim in the Benares and not die of dysentery.
But we're supposed to be better than that.
Oh, well, of course, we're supposed to be better than that. Good for us.
Yeah, we are supposed to be better than that.
And all of our cars now have airbags. And none of our people know how to make airbags or fix airbags.
That's kind of a problem.
That's because we have taken the ability for them to rely on their self and handle risk themselves. We've taken that away from them. This is the Department of Risk Management and thinking because it's good for you.
And actually, here I agree with you.
All right?
Right, and I think that there is a giant gap between means and ends that needs to be discussed. And the problem is that the only means that the Democratic Party knows to use to do anything is immense top-down regulation.
Absolutely.
Large bureaucratic staff.
Yep.
And to kind of grind away, everything into this kind of 1984 or Brave New World, depending on your view of the world, right? In which basically everybody is manageable by this bureaucracy.
Subject to these regulatory capture. That's the word that I've been looking for.
Okay, regulatory capture. That's
they want to capture everybody.
Yeah, public choice theory.
And they want to regulate
all public choice theory.
That. So,
but the question is,
the problem.
So let's stipulate that that's an immense problem, and that's a problem that cuts across right and left.
Yes, as well as antitrust. Because
No,
antitrust is part of that 5%
That's right. No.
too.
Completely. And these things cut across right and left.
Yes.
But my point is that there's got to be a way to use different organizational structures and different value structures to accomplish the same end, which is to defend the relatively powerless against the relatively powerful. Because if you don't do that, right, Amazon workers are going to get worked to death in 120-degree buildings, and I'll get my stuff, in a day and a half, and I'm happy about it.
I think the market will solve that.
How's the market going to solve that? When in human history has the market ever solved that? Name once.
Name once. Okay, the Great Migration. Black people had enough sense to know, I don't want to live in Alabama anymore.
Yeah.
I'm being worked to death behind this mule that I don't own to just
I'm going to go work in a car factory.
I'm going to go live in Detroit.
Okay, but the problem is
I'm going to work in a car factory.
But that presumed that you had an economy that had an appetite for people with two hands, a strong back, and a reasonable set of skills.
Well, I think we have an entrepreneurial class here that's bigger than what we think it's capable of. And we have a duplicate slice of the 10% that are capable of running companies that can compete against these monopolies. So what I'm saying is you can actually do this, and it's the government is not allowing small and medium-sized businesses to do this because the choices would be right in front of us all the time.
As opposed to Amazon or Microsoft or Google not allowing them to do it by basically cutting their markets out from under them, and basically doing acqui-hires in which they say, look, we could build what you've got that it'd take us a year and it'd cost us $5 million. So we'll give you $3 million for your company and hire you for $150,000.
Well, there's also open source software that's free.
Yeah,
and
and
half
I
the
remember
internet is running on
and
that.
I remember when Open Office. No, they're running on Red Hat. They're running on commercialized versions of open source software.
But it's still free.
Red Hat.
It's still
Yeah, but okay. So
Amazon is not the best example to pick on, and we can get into that later. But I'm saying the neoliberal establishment, which is the Barack Obama folks,
yeah.
those are the ones who want giant enough corporations.
Oh, sure.
So that they can have their tax base.
No. This is like the unholy alliance of like the rich, the giant corporations, and the dependent.
Yes.
Right. That now are the constituency of the Democratic Party.
And they don't know any other way to operate.
Because the good news is, if I'm rich or I'm a giant corporation, the Democrats will build a wall around me and defend me.
Absolutely.
Right? As long as I give them enough tax dollars to support people in public service and the dependent.
Yes.
And that's your problem in a nutshell.
And it's going to take somebody to crack that political majority, which has kind of happened by a mishap.
Yeah.
We have Mr. Hyde in office, and he wasn't that Jekyll in the first place.
No.
And people are going to realize that block doesn't work anymore.
So what you're kind of looking for is the "Do not crucify my people on a cross of gold" speech.
Yeah.
Right. The William Jennings Bryan kind of like populist, like, look, we've got all these downtrodden farmers and the economic policy is screwing them. Let's move to a more liberal economic policy so the dollar, can be sustained.
I don't know that the centralized banks and that whole Keynesian thing actually works well enough for anybody to say that they can do that from the top down. I think the future of America is to look at old cities that have survived.
Yeah.
What is it like to live in Beirut? Beirut still has a port. It still functions.
Yeah.
But they've gone through war. Bogota has gone through tremendous dislocations. Venezuela, the people who don't starve are going to figure a way out of it. And we just don't have enough dislocation and disruption in the power of these old line liberals to free up human potential so they can do stuff.
Well,
so there actually has to be kind of an anarchy that works here. And it will work because we have infrastructure. Because we have plumbing, we have sewers, we have electricity, we have roads. We have bridges that may be falling apart, but we have four-wheel drives that can drive across. And I think that people will do it.
I have a lot of faith in the people in America, the people who were born here and the people who came here. I have this kind of naive belief that when the chips are down, they'll do the right thing.
They will.
But I also believe that we're building institutions that are making that really hard to do. And that unfortunately what I don't see on the Republican side is I don't see a clear set of statements and values that talk about what are we going to do for the Amazon worker, right? What are we going to do for the poor hostess at the restaurant?
I think all of that. There's going to be a gig economy that works.
Yes.
It's going to be something like Uber.
And
that Republicans don't plan, that Democrats don't plan. That they're so far behind their whole regulatory apparatus or their lobbying apparatus.
So what you're going to wind up with, you're going to wind up with Uber, where people work 60 hours a week to make $1,000 a week.
Maybe so.
Right, and the company makes $1 trillion.
Maybe so.
I'm not loving that.
Yeah, but it's still so. My theory is this. Orwell, when I was looking up the magic of leftist thinking, went to Wigan Pier.
Yep, I remember that.
Wigan,
I know the book.
And he says there are a clutch of millionaires that have captured this industry, and they're too lazy to spend their own money to improve the lot of these people.
Right.
That. It might have been 1% and the 99%, whatever the percent was.
But it's not even too
lazy. It was still the class of people who controlled all the capital.
Yep.
Who could, by their own admission, just say, we don't give a rat's ass about those people, and we're going to work them into ground.
Yep.
Okay? What nobody could figure out is what would happen when we had 1 million millionaires. When you could not capture that industry. When you could not control that market.
You know,
And that's what globalism has given us.
yeah, but the problem is, I think you're wildly optimistic about the freedom of the marketplace. And I think that, you know, as much as the government has been captured, the market has been captured as well. And I don't think we have anything that resembles a free market in certain big sectors of the economy. And I think that the risk to us today is both that we have these really brittle, inflexible institutions that can get very divorced from reality and that will eventually have to deal with reality. Mm-hmm. And that we don't have the cultural kind of balancing that kept, you know, there's a reason why Weber wrote The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism.
Okay.
Right? There's a reason why capitalism didn't grow into what it became in the Northern European Protestant world, in the Southern European Catholic world, or in the Levant, or anywhere else in the world.
Those are all very small worlds. But let's move into our next conversation.
So let's take a break for a second.